So I'll just bring my screen back up. Over to you, Sophia.
Great, thanks, Naomi. Sorry, I think someone might have accidentally muted me. Great, thank you. I'm Sophia. I'm here from Children's Parliament today. And just to caveat, it's a little bit of a segue in. Children's Parliament actually works with children. So we work explicitly with children ages about 13 and 14, all the way down to the early years. So slightly different framing, but I'm going to share some experiences today that I've been working on over the past year, my journey with Children's Parliament, and some reflections for how we can really involve children in climate policy and in decision making around the climate emergency. Naomi, if we could move to the first slide, please. Thank you. So just to frame what Children's Parliament approach is in general, we work around the UNCRC and the principles around that. So to summarize it, our dream is that children will grow up in a place of love, happiness, and understanding. We really work through relationships and making sure that everyone feels supported, and we create a real safe space, including online, which has had interesting challenges. And our overall mission is to inspire greater awareness and understanding of the power of children's human rights and to support the implementation in Scotland of the UNCRC into Scots law. So I will be talking a little bit later about how that really relates to the climate emergency and how this is coming more and more to the forefront. And again, just to reiterate, we actually work with children age 14 and below. So not quite youth work, but still applicable. If we could move to the next slide, please. Just to give a little introduction to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So this is encompasses, I think it's 27 articles outlining children's rights, but the overall mission is to ensure that every child grows up and develops in an environment of kindness, empathy, trust, and dignity, which I think is something that's really important. And two articles I'm going to focus on today that, for me and in general, I think help frame the concept of the climate emergency being interlinked with children's rights, are Articles 6 and 12. And I've just summarized them here. I've not used the exact UN language, which can be found online. But Article 6 talks about children's rights to develop and grow up in a safe environment. And, you know, we're even seeing this week and this summer, I think it's really bringing to the forefront that, especially for younger children with sort of less maybe ability or financial means to move around, they are in that physical environment. And that includes how the climate is changing, if it's changing to dangerous levels. And then the other article is, as we've highlighted through Our Bright Future as well, the right to be included in decision-making on issues that are important to them. We are seeing over and over again through the years that climate change is very important to children. They know about it, they're seeing it, they're experiencing it already. And we do talk about the future, but it's also happening right now, and they're telling us that. And we can move to the next slide. We approach everything through rights-based practice. So I'm going to be talking today about an example of this. Our hope and dream is that this can apply to many other situations, but we have just finished off being part of Scotland's Climate Assembly. So we facilitated the participation of over 100 children in Scotland's Climate Assembly, which was a decision-making body of citizens, a citizens' assembly that was put together following Scotland's Climate Act in 2019. And these children were actually the youngest children in the world to have participated in a climate citizens assembly. So this was the first time that this happened around the world that we know of. So it was quite powerful, and it was very impactful and a huge success in many ways, which I'll be walking you through our journey in a second. Move to the next slide. Thank you. I wanted to open up with a quote because I think, as I mentioned before, we do work from a rights-based approach. So part of it is getting children into these spaces around decision-making, but it's also about a process and a journey. Especially during COVID, we were with the same group of children for 1.5 years over lockdown. We really built relationships and got to know each other over Zoom. So everything we draw upon tries to be quite quote-based and coming very much from the children from an ethos perspective, but also because we built those relationships. And I think it was really special, especially for the younger children, to see their quotes and their ideas feeding directly into international and national decision-making spaces around the climate emergency. And just to bring in as well, we didn't work with children who came to us as climate activists. We worked with a network of schools across Scotland and went through a process with teachers to specifically choose to work with children who maybe wouldn't normally have access to democratic processes, lots of extracurriculars, and we tried to work across a spread of rural and urban experiences and different experiences of being in minority groups as well. So these weren't climate activists coming to these spaces. Anyway, I'm going to open up with a quote, but I think just to sum it up, this is from one of our MSYPs who came with us along this journey. They were 12 years old from West Lothian, and they said that being in the Children's Parliament and a part of Scotland's Climate Assembly has opened up lots of new perspectives for me because I didn't really know about climate change before, and I've learned so much. I think that other people, adults, also know that. Now children do care about climate change. And this is something that we did encounter at the beginning of the process of their participation, that the adults in the Climate Assembly sometimes didn't necessarily understand or believe that children, especially younger children, really did care about the climate emergency and had the tools to make decisions around that. And can move to the next slide. So we're kind of jumping quite across the years. So this process did take 1.5 years, but throughout this, the children developed 42 calls to action, which were laid in Scottish Parliament on tackling the climate emergency in Scotland. And this ended up being very impactful. It led to the development of The Moment, which was an event between Scottish Youth Parliament and Children's Parliament, which brought together over 1,000 children and young people to speak to their decision makers in the run up to COP26 on their calls to action and what they wanted to see on tackling the climate emergency as well. So this one element of involving children in Scotland's Climate Assembly actually grew in scale, and I think showed the power that of enabling, you know, everyday children and, you know, everyone does have the right to be involved, but really supporting them to have that voice and to share their experiences within their local communities of the climate emergency and what they wanted to see happen next. And then we had some quite sort of maybe unexpected and funny moments as well. The children's mascot was a hedgehog, a little stuffed animal that went to every school involved around Scotland. And its name was Brocken, which is Gaelic for porridge. And Brocken actually accidentally made it into the New York Times website. And as a representative for the children speaking at COP26. But I think it was important to remember that, you know, part of this process was making it child friendly and having a lot of fun, involving mascots. So there's sort of a learning journey where the children became empowered and were able to articulate their calls to action, but the adults involved also had this experience of a space around policy being really child friendly, and they also drew a lot from that as well. And I think an example of how this kind of came to life was the parents who accompanied the children to COP26 actually started a Children's Parliament Trees for Life Grove when they left, which I'll send a link in the chat, but you can donate money and it plants a tree for the children in the Highlands, and it's called the Children's Parliament Grove. So the parents who we didn't directly work with saw the children being involved and saw how passionate they were and decided to take action themselves as well. And then we've also been working with Scottish Government on a commission around the Learning for Sustainability Action Plan in Scotland. So it came off the back of a lot of the children's calls to action being around a more holistic climate education. So the direct impact of their involvement in that decision making is that their ideas will now feed into a new Learning for Sustainability Action Plan and how they're taught a climate education in Scotland. And I just really want to end off with this highlighted impact of how intergenerational and positive the experience of bringing children into these decision-making spaces around the climate emergency was. One of the children shared that they felt it was really much easier for children to speak to adults that they had a bond with, and that actually gave them stronger ideas and calls to action on the climate emergency. And that's something we heard echoed from the adults by the end of the process as well. So yeah, it's quite a lot of information. It was a very long process. It was 1.5 years. So I'll put some links in the chat as well if you have any questions or you'd like some more information. But overall, it was just such a positive experience of seeing that children's rights in action, and seeing the benefits both on a policy and impact level, but also on a relationships-based and individual level for both the children and the adults involved. Thank you.